again, and welcome back to episode 2 of my Bridgerton Breakdown series. So today we are talking about episode 2, Shock and Delight, of the new Netflix series Bridgerton. And I'm going to try and make this just a little bit shorter than the last one. I did talk for ages with the last one, but there was a lot to cover in my defence. A lot of introductions to be made, a lot of stuff to cover, so we're getting for slightly quicker. So without further ado, let's get started. So in episode 2, one of the main things we get is a lot of Simon's backstory. It's really not changed that much from the book. The majority of it is pretty much as written. I've got my copy here, my new copy, just to refer back to if necessary. And the show opens with the scene of Simon's birth. There's his mother, the Duchess of Hastings, is obviously having a bit of a rough time, and Simon's father, the Duke of Hastings, is being very impatient to meet his new offspring, everything crossed that it's a son. Now in the book we do find out that the Duchess has had a number of failed pregnancies, and you know, the Duke's getting a bit fed up with it all and she's worn out, bless her, and the suggestion is that the doctors have told her that she really shouldn't be having any more children, but she is a dutiful Duchess, so she continues to allow him to try for more children, and Simon is the culmination of that. In the book there's a little bit more dark humour around the kind of the opening prologue. I don't know, it didn't seem quite as dark as it did in the show. In the show it's just tragic. The scene ends obviously with Simon's mum dying, and the Duke is in his room with all of his friends showing off the new baby, and it always, the line from the book really sticks with me, so I'm just going to read it now if I may. The Duke mounted one of his prized gedlings and rode off to celebrate, shouting his good fortune to all who would listen. Meanwhile the Duchess, who had been bleeding steadily since the birth, slipped into unconsciousness and then finally just slipped away. I always just found that so sad, and in the show it's even darker. I mean, there's like a dark filter over it all. It's just tragic, and he just doesn't care. Yeah, it's a kick in the gut to start the episode off. So later on in the episode we also meet Simon when he's a little bit older. So the two young actors who played young Simon were both absolutely fantastic. They were so adorable, so sweet, so talented. They had so much to portray and to get across in such a little amount of time, and they were so brilliant. They had the stammer to contend with. I was just blown away. Very, very, very impressed. In the scenes with young Simon and the Duke, we do get a little bit more of a motivation behind Simon's father and why he is the way he is. There's not so much of that in the book, but in the series we see that their title, the Dukedom of Hastings, has only recently been bestowed upon them by the royal family, and it could easily be taken away again, and so Simon's father feels all this pressure to live up to expectations and to be the perfect family, and while it absolutely in no way excuses him for being such a douchebag, it kind of makes you see why he may be that way. He's definitely one of the most hated characters in all of the Bridgerton books, but at least you can kind of see how he may end up in that place. So in the books, the Nurse Hopkins character is the person who helps Simon overcome his stammer and grow to be the young man that we meet and fall in love with. In the series, this role is kind of taken over by Lady Danbury, who is more of the driving force between Simon gaining confidence and gaining the kind of power to be the man he's supposed to be. And it was lovely, really. The scene between Lady Danbury and young Simon where she tells him that he can speak and he can achieve so much is really beautifully done by both actors, and it's such a lovely moment between the two of them, and it does help you to understand why Simon might be more willing to listen to her and to follow her kind of guidance as he gets older. In the books she is definitely his aunt, he definitely kind of respects her, but I think that closeness of relationship maybe isn't there, so this did help with that. It also helps to give us a bit of Simon's internal monologue, because in the books we do find out that he has built this facade of himself where he is more confident than he appears. Maybe he's a bit stern, maybe he's a bit quiet, maybe he gives this impression of being quite distant and aloof and not having a lot to say, when in actual fact it was all to cover up his stammer and his own perceived weaknesses and his flaws that he felt he was trying to hide from society. So I think the scene with Lady Danbury really helps to bring that across and show people, her saying, you need to create a character for yourself that will be commanding and dominate the situation, and you need to lead it. You can't let other people lead that for you. So it was a lovely moment between the two of them, and it does help set them up for the rest of the series. Lady D later brings Simon to meet his father, and again we are now moving slightly away from the books. In the books, the suggestion is Simon goes to see his father when he's young, alone. All of the servants think that he's dead, in what is quite a sad moment. And in the show, Simon has been writing regularly to his father to try and keep him up to date with his progress. In the books, it's actually the other way around, and once the Duke of Hastings realises that Simon is not going to be a complete embarrassment, it's actually when he's quite a bit older, he's at university, and he realises that he is going to grow to be the Duke that you would hope him to be. The father starts to try and make more advances to Simon to get back into his good graces and to form some kind of relationship and kind of take some credit for his son being who he is. So in the show, Simon writes the letters. In the book, Simon's father writes the letters, and in the book Simon refuses to read the letters, and it's all a thing where Daphne has to try and get him to read the letters. But in this show we have these letters from Simon which were never read that just get left there to gather dust, and we will find them again later in the series. I don't know if it matters one way or the other which way round it goes. I think personally I preferred the way in the book because I liked the idea that Simon just had no interest in his father and refused to have anything to do with him. I quite liked that element of his character, but ultimately I think it doesn't make a major bit of difference to the plot. The letters do come into it again later down the line, and we do then get the fabulous moment where Simon visits his father on his deathbed and calls him a fucking monster, which is different, and then makes the vow to his father that will dominate Simon's actions and decisions throughout the course of the whole story, where he vows never to marry, never to have children, and that the Duke of Hastings line will die with him. So it was quite nice to get that moment verbalised and to get it there on screen so you can really understand Simon's motivation and where he's coming from. Do I still think it's a ridiculous motivation? Absolutely, Simon, grow up. But you can kind of understand where he's coming from, and it does help the audience to see it properly. So back in the present day, Simon and Daphne's ruse is coming along swimmingly. They are making a stir in society. They are the most talked about couple. Everybody wants to know what the Duke and Miss Daphne have been getting up to. I mean, I did have to have a slight grumble at Simon leaving some unnamed woman's bed to go to promenade with Daphne, but what can I say? He is still a rake at this point, even if I don't approve. The Bridgerton drawing room is full of suitors, as one would expect for the Diamond of the First Water. We did miss out on a really lovely scene from the books where Simon actually goes to call on Daphne in the morning amidst all the suitors, sees her surrounded by adoring men, simpering, and you even see the poetry scene that is shown with Marina is actually more to do with Daphne in the book, so that was a slight change. And you do also miss out on Simon bringing flowers to Daphne, and more importantly to her mother, Lady Violet. It's referenced in the show. If you listen carefully, you'll hear her say that she's received flowers from the Duke for herself and her mother, but it is a particularly beautiful moment in the books, and I would have liked to see it. It would have also been nice to be able to see maybe a bit of jealousy from Simon as he saw Daphne surrounded by suitors, but alas, 'twas not to be. In this episode, we also get a lot more ball action from Simon and Daphne. Wait, I don't think that 100% came across the way I intended it to. In this episode, we have a lot more scenes of Simon and Daphne at society balls. Yes. Which is a lot of fun. I particularly liked the moment when Daphne suggests that they should look like they're enjoying themselves, and they two of them kind of giggle that that's going to be a bit of a chore for them, and then immediately in the next moment you see them dancing and laughing and obviously having a lovely time. It's a great nod to the audience that these two really enjoy each other's company, and they are not finding it that much of an act or a chore to spend time with each other and to have fun with each other. That's coming quite naturally, and that's all helping to show the relationship is developing and growing. I loved it, it was sweet. In the ball scenes, you also see this lovely slow-mo moment where Daphne and Simon enter the ballroom, petals falling. There's more of those fantastic musical arrangements that I absolutely adore. I must download the soundtrack, that reminds me. and it's just, everything is so beautiful and moody. And we also get that fantastic moment where when they're dancing, Simon rests his hand on Daphne's back above her dress line. And it sounds so silly to say it now because the idea of touching someone's back is just not that big a deal, but back then that would have been monumental, skin on skin contact. I mean, men used to wear gloves all the time, ladies wore gloves all the time. It was a big deal, and you can tell Daphne's face says it all. I got tingles. It was wonderful. When I was planning the script, I wanted to talk about a few other scenes that kind of stood out to me, or other scenes that had special moments, and then I realised in this series, and what makes this series great, is that almost every scene, probably every scene, has something about it that makes it stand out, whether it's a particularly funny moment, a particularly dramatic moment, a particularly sexy moment. They all have something going for them. I mean, every single scene I could think of as I was rewatching this series to try and write these scripts, every single one of them was noteworthy. There was something to be said. So I'm just going to rattle through a few of my highlights that really stood out to me. I mean, there's the boxing scene. Who doesn't love the boxing scene? It's great for developing the characters of Anthony and Simon. You really get to build on that best friend sister nonsense of Anthony being like, 1, she's my sister, 2, you're a rake who doesn't want to get married, and 3, she's my sister, leave her alone. I just love it. It's so funny. You also get this really important line from Anthony where he says family before all else, which really gives you an insight into Anthony's mindset and his kind of attitude of family should be your primary concern, that's where your duty lies, that's where your responsibility lies, and how it's very different for Simon. They both had different backgrounds. Simon was not raised in a loving, nurturing family environment, so for him probably family isn't the most important thing. But for Anthony, who's been raised in this huge family where, you know, he's seen his father loving and caring for them all, it kind of is the most important thing. So it's really good to show how the two guys, their attitudes and their viewpoints may be a bit different, and I really enjoyed it. It's also a great moment to see Simon without his shirt on, so no complaints from me there, thank you very much. We get a lovely little short scene between Anthony and Violet discussing tulips and how they represent passion, and for the readers, this is yet again another little nod to Anthony's romance that's coming in season 2. It better be coming in season 2, that's all I'm saying. Because there's bits with Kate and tulips and all the rest of it, and she even says at one point maybe your wife might like them, which, oh, as a reader we were all just clapping and leaping up and down saying, where's Kate already? Give us Kate, please. And then there's also a very sweet scene with Eloise and Daphne where they're discussing childbirth and the fact that Violet's last pregnancy was obviously quite traumatic. She had a near-death experience, how that's obviously left its mark on Eloise. She's now very, very worried about it. And it's funny because even nowadays, pregnancy is a scary thing. There are a lot of changes your body goes through and it's a very daunting experience. It must have been so much worse back then. So for Eloise to voice that, it was interesting and it made me feel very sorry for her, and I hope that she manages to work through that in future series. We also got lots of lovely moments with the Queen. I'm still undecided on how I feel about the introduction of the Queen character. So far, all I can see is that she's there to add a bit of drama, put a bit of pressure on the main character. She says to Violet, you know, if a family member has my favour, then all of the family will kind of benefit from that, but if you fall out of favour, well, maybe not so much. And it drives Violet to try and resolve some issues, but ultimately I've yet to decide if she... would I notice if she wasn't in it, I think is my big question. I love her, the performance is brilliant. I mean, we got the moment with the snuff, which was such a random moment but really funny. Her mail is sent on a tray, it gets its own little tray when it's delivered, and then that poor contortionist, I mean, she is literally bending over backwards to try and entertain this Queen, and the Queen's just like, I'm bored. Just loved it, but I'm still not sure whether or not I need the Queen. One of the major subplots in episode 2 is the continuation of Marina's condition, and primarily, how did she get that way? It was so much fun watching all of the young ladies blow their minds with how this young woman got in the family way. I mean, I actually let my 10-year-old watch a little bit of this episode and the previous episode, skipping all the naughty bits, obviously. She loves a period drama as much as Mummy does. And she was just baffled that these girls didn't know where babies came from. She has a very basic understanding of where babies come from, and she was just confused. Like, why do they not know this? So it was really, really funny, and all of the girls' reactions were brilliant. From Lady Featherington saying that you should stay away from her because it's catching, to Penelope going to have a chat with Marina and trying to find out maybe what exactly happened and being fobbed off a bit. During that conversation with Marina, we hear Sir George Crane mentioned for the first time, which lets us as readers know that Marina is on the path to the same destination that we'd expect her to be. She might be going on a journey that none of us have ever seen before or expected, but that gives us hope that the destination is going to be the same. It's not good news for Marina, but it's good news for readers like me, who her plot is kind of important later on down the line, so that was reassuring that we're heading in the right direction. There was also in that scene a really brief mention of Wellington and the war, and it did get me to thinking that we are smack in the middle of the Napoleonic Wars at this point, and none of the Bridgerton boys have made any suggestions they should go fight, which seems a bit odd because at that time period and in Regency novels it was very often for the second or the third son to go to war and fight, so something I hadn't considered before, so thank you Bridgerton for putting that in the back of my mind. But I think ultimately in this section the gold star for the most valuable player in this episode has to go to Eloise for every single conversation she has surrounding pregnancy, childbirth, babies, the lot. She was freaking hilarious. So from her Penelope, you must find out where babies come from for how we stop it happening to ourselves, to her worrying about not getting time to do her accomplishments, to walking into the drawing room and just announcing where did babies come from. I loved it. I mean, the bit where she says something like, did you know you don't have to be married? It's not even a requirement, apparently. Just had me rolling on the floor laughing. It was so funny. Loved the bit where she's trying to get her brothers to tell her how babies are made, and their mum is obviously getting so frustrated. Is it Colin makes a fantastic joke about getting their sticks out? That whole section, perfect. Absolutely freaking perfect. Loved it. It really goes to show how young ladies' ears have to be protected at all times, and how much they were kept in the dark, and really how many problems in this series would have been solved if the ladies just knew where babies came from. Seriously, so many problems. And surely they were better set to protect themselves if they knew how you could get that way. I know it's a different time period, but it really is the strangest thing to watch, and it was done brilliantly. This episode for me though will always go down in the history books as the Nigel Berbrooke is a full-on villain episode. I mean, he goes for it in this episode. He is just villain 101 from beginning to end. First we see him in the ballroom where Simon outs him to Anthony, tells him what a cad he's been and that he tried to assault his sister and she decked him. And I thought, oh wow, they've stopped him there. But no, Nigel just keeps on coming back for more. I mean, he then goes to try and badger Simon into backing off and says some of the most offensive things about Daphne, to the point where Simon beats him to a bloody pulp, which I have to say by this point, he completely deserves. I mean, if only for the line about when buying a horse you don't negotiate with the horse, he deserved everything he got. I mean, I'd have punched him for that alone, so bravo Simon. And then he's still not done. I was sure we weren't going to see him anymore then. But then he goes and waltzes into the picnic scene and ruins a perfectly nice picnic. Speaking of the picnic scene, I'm not sure if it's meant to be a direct kind of reference to the Greenwich scene in the book where they go on the boat, but it did recur to me at this point how much I missed that scene. I mean, there's the fantastic bit where the boys get knocked into the water at the end of the scene, which, I mean, Pride and Prejudice tells you we like to see a man with a wet shirt, that's all I'm saying. We also miss out on the fabulous line from Hyacinth where she says to the Duke that if he does choose to marry her sister, she has his full approval. He has her full approval, but if he doesn't, she'd appreciate it if he waited for her. And I just love that line, and I don't think it was in the episode. Please let me know if I missed it, because I need to go back and watch it, but I don't remember hearing it. But anyway, back to what actually happened at the picnic. Old Nigel comes storming in looking a state and decides to blackmail the Bridgertons by threatening to ruin Daphne. I have to say at this point, I was really, really surprised at how much the Bridgertons were just willing to lie down and take this. I mean, talk about negotiating with terrorists. I thought they had more gumption than that. The Bridgertons in the book don't give the impression that they would allow Daphne to marry this idiot for any reason, even at the cost of her reputation. Like, I don't imagine her marriage is going to be a good one. I don't imagine he's going to be respectful of her. The things that he said up to this point lead me to think his wife is going to have a freaking horrible time. And yet, they're just like, so's Daph's, nothing we can do. I mean, her mother even has a conversation with her where she like taps her on the hand and says, at least you'll have children. It's bizarre, really. It does, however, give us a fantastic, fantastic cameo from Caroline Quentin, who I adore. She's wonderful. She was fabulous in this season Strictly Come Dancing, and she did a wonderful job as Nigel's mum. She was so funny. The proper doting mother who can't see how awful her son is. She mentions him being an only child, and he definitely isn't in the books. We do actually meet one of his siblings a bit further on in the series, and also he ends up marrying one of the Featherington girls, which I can't see how they can do now, because I mean, they're not the nicest girls, but I wouldn't wish him on anybody. Like, my worst enemy, I wouldn't wish him on Cressida Cowper. So yeah, I'm really interested to see what they do with the character of Nigel, and whether this is it, we never see him again after this episode, or whether he does come back and cause trouble later on down the line. All of this Nigel drama culminates in our first real show of girl power in this series. Lady Violet basically digs up some juicy gossip on Nigel Berbrooke and plans to use it to ruin his reputation first, to discredit him in the eyes of the Ton, and hopefully get rid of him for good. Daphne is obviously a little bit dubious. Who's going to take the word of one woman over one man in this day and age? But Violet has an ace up her sleeve. She uses one of the tools that women had available to them: gossip. First, she uses the maid's gossip to get the information in the first place. She then uses the gossip of women to spread that message around the Ton until ultimately it lands with the queen of gossip herself, Lady Whistledown, who publishes it in her book, makes Nigel the laughingstock of the Ton, and sends him running off with his tail between his legs. Now, I liked this bit when I first watched the series. It was a lot of fun. It was a good, there you go, Nigel moment. Having watched the whole series, this moment is now more important to me than I realised, because it is the first time we see a woman using the tools she has when she is left with no other choice. And I think for me that's something that is a key theme as we go throughout the series. It's definitely what I took away with me after watching the whole series, and it's definitely something which caused a lot of conversation in my house and with people I've spoken to on the internet since. Women in the 1800s had very little power. You know, Daphne is at risk of having her reputation ruined, and if her reputation's ruined, she won't get married, she won't have children, she'll probably get sent to live off in some house in the country where no one will talk to her. Her life is effectively over. And she has very little she can do to get to Nigel. The guys are all off there talking about fighting duels and whatever else, but as a woman, there was very little you could do. Lady Violet comes across as a generally kind, loving, peaceful woman. She doesn't come across as malicious or vindictive or nasty, but, and this is the important but, when she is threatened, when the people she loves, more importantly, are threatened, when she is backed into a corner and doesn't appear to have any other choice to her, she uses every weapon she has at her disposal to go after the person who is threatening her and her loved ones. So, she's a woman, she can gossip, she can spread gossip, she knows how easy it is to get the message out there, she knows how vindictive Lady Whistledown can be and how powerful she can be, and she uses that to her advantage to get rid of that perceived threat. This time it's only a minor one, and it's done to somebody that we all pretty much agree deserves it. But it's important because it's going to happen again a number of times through the show, and at those moments you're left going, well, what would you do? What would you do differently? Would you have done what Violet did, or would you have found another way out? Would you have outed Nigel so publicly and ruined his reputation and sent him scampering off to the country? Did Nigel deserve it? Does it matter if he deserved it? Does that make it right? It starts conversations and it starts people thinking, and that is so clever. And the fact that as I now watch it back, I can see that tying into other key moments throughout the show, it gets me so excited. I can't wait to talk about future episodes. I am going to go into this in so much more detail later on, so brace yourself for that. But I just thought, wow, they were setting the stage for that right there at the beginning. I have seen a really important quote from Chris Van Dusen, the showrunner, where he says they allowed their women to make questionable choices. Yes, that is so important. Your characters have to be allowed to make choices that you don't always agree with as an audience, but they have to be allowed to make them if they fit in line with their character's motivations and their character's beliefs and attitudes. And this Violet moment is the first time we see that. It's setting us up for that being a thing that's going to happen. I love it. Bravo, Violet. Thank you, Bridgerton. This was episode 2. I think I'm just about done. I can't wait to talk more later. Thank you very much for watching. If you managed to get to the end of this, and thank you so very much, and I will see you again soon for episode 3. Look, my little pal's back again. Do you like Bridgerton too? Is that what it is?